This is Anarchast.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Anarchast, your home for anarchy on the internet. I have a really special guest today coming in from Tokyo, Japan, Roger Ver, known as the Bitcoin Jesus. Dear Lord, Bitcoin Jesus, it's a fire. And he's done many things. He's known as a Bitcoin evangelist. He's so many interesting stories. This is going to be one of the best Anarchast episodes ever, just because of the interesting stories he has. He recently lost a bet and had to donate $1 million to a charity of his choice. So we'll talk about that. He recently was hacked and overcame the hacking, and Wired came up with the title of the article, "This is what happens when you hack and extort the Bitcoin Jesus." So he's got all kinds of really interesting stuff. He's been around in Bitcoin for quite a while, I think 2011, but we'll ask him all about that. Before we get into everything though, Roger, I have to ask everybody, how did you become an anarchist?
I think like a lot of people, it kind of started with Murray Rothbard. I read a bunch of other books by Ludwig von Mises, and I was kind of interested in the economic side of things, and realized that the best way to achieve a more prosperous world is through free markets. But it wasn't until I came across Murray Rothbard that he kind of really pushed me over the line from being a minarchist to an anarchist or a voluntarist, in which I realized that everything the state does just makes the world a poorer place, and creates more violence and more trouble and more problems for the people that are involved. So thanks to Mr. Murray Rothbard, I am the person who I am today.
That's great. Murray Rothbard, the original enemy of the state. One of the biggest leaders, of course, in the anarcho-capitalist movement, anarchist movement. Let's get into all kinds of things about Bitcoin, because that's what you're most well known about. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how you got into Bitcoin originally? Where did you hear about it, and how did you progress, and what was your involvement in it in the early days?
Yeah, I've been living in Japan for over 8 years, and I don't know, maybe 5 years ago or something, I was kind of feeling bored one afternoon and was looking around on the internet, and I was feeling a little bit alone in the world as a libertarian, voluntarist, anarchist type, and I searched for, I don't know, libertarian podcast or something to that effect, and came across Free Talk Live, which I'm sure lots of the Anarchast viewers are familiar with, and started listening to that and felt more and more happy with, there's lots of other people that see the world very similar to myself, and the host of that show had mentioned Bitcoin, and then I Googled it, and from there it was down the rabbit hole, and it's been all Bitcoin all day, every day for over 3 years now. So that was thanks to Free Talk Live for introducing.
Wow, that's great. I love to hear those stories. And it's also interesting that you're in Tokyo, Japan, because we've had on at least 3 people from Japan on Anarchast. We've had James Corbett, and Mike Rogers and Mark Abella. So I don't know if you know any or all of them, but
I know all 3.
Oh, there you go, small world. So that's great. Awesome to hear that. And I'll have to get over there sometime. I've been in Japan in probably 6 or 7 years, and I love visiting Tokyo. It's like being in a different world. Let's talk more about Bitcoin. Let's talk about your Bitcoin bet a little bit. So a little over 2 years ago, you made a bet for $10,000 that Bitcoin would outperform gold, silver, the U.S. stock market, and the U.S. dollar by more than 100 times over the next 2 years. And I guess you were a little off. It took 2.2 years or something. You can maybe explain.
2 years and 2 months.
Yeah. And so it cost you $1 million. You should have made that bet in dollars, because that would have been just, the $10,000 would have actually been worth 2 years later about $8,000 in real purchasing price. But tell us a little bit about how that all evolved.
Yeah, the reason I made the bet is back in late 2011, Bitcoin had, its kind of first major bubble in which the mainstream media paid a bit of attention, and in the course of a couple of weeks, the price of Bitcoins went from around $3 a Bitcoin up to a little over $30 a Bitcoin. But at that point, there were no, smartphone wallets, there were no shopping websites, there wasn't really anything at all to Bitcoin other than just the idea. But people like myself and yourself and other people that hear about it and understood it, even before all this other infrastructure existed, we realized just how important and how world-changing this was going to be. But a lot of people in the press and online were saying, Bitcoin's a bubble, or it's a Ponzi scheme, or it's a scam, or whatever to that effect. And I wanted to really kind of make a point that, no, Bitcoin's more than just a flash in the pan or a bubble or just a passing fad. This is something that's here to stay, and it's really going to change the world. And so at that point, I said that I was willing to bet $10,000 worth of Bitcoin, that over the next 2 years, the the price of Bitcoin would outperform gold, silver, and the U.S. stock market, not just 1-to-1, but by more than 100 times. And in reality, it took just a little over 2 years for it to outperform all of those by more than 100 times, but it certainly did. And I think we're still just getting started in the grand scheme of things with Bitcoin. So, but because technically it took a little bit longer than 2 years, I decided to donate the $10,000 worth of Bitcoins that I had set aside at the time I made the bet, a little more than 2 years before that date. And I donated it to the Foundation for Economic Education, which is before the internet, you had to actually order books in like catalogs and things like that. Laissez-faire Books had a catalog that I used to order lots of things from, and this was kind of in the mid to early 90s, before a bunch of this stuff was online, or before I personally really had access to the internet, and before that sort of thing existed. So the Foundation for Economic Education used to publish, or I think they still do publish, an article or a magazine called The Freeman. And I used to get that while I was in high school, and it was because of reading things in the Freeman and reading books published by the Foundation for Economic Education that really helped shape my worldview and allowed me to understand just why Bitcoin was going to become so incredibly important. So I was really happy to be able to donate over $1 million worth of Bitcoins to the Foundation for Economic Education. And it was good for me. I think it was good for them. And I think it's going to be good for everybody all over the world, because now they can use that money to spread these ideas that are really going to help make the world a better place for everybody, including myself.
That's fantastic. And that actually goes to a topic I just talked to Jason King, who is doing a run across America, Bitcoin, to raise awareness for both homelessness and Bitcoin. And we're talking about how charitable a lot of the people in the Bitcoin community is. And that really just ties in that. And also very honest, because a lot of people who would have made that bet would have sort of, well, it was pretty close, or, just forgot about it or whatever. But you were just honest, and you lived up to it. It was 2 years and 2 months, not exactly 2 years. And then you donated money to a cause that you really feel is important. And I see that happening all the time. And it's funny, because a lot of people talk about us anarchists or capitalists, or both, anarcho-capitalists, and say that we only care about ourselves. We're not, without the government, who would take care of, charities and things like that. But every day, almost, I always see Bitcoiners just being so charitable and giving. One of I love the last article that was in Wired about what happened when you were recently hacked and extorted. And the reason I loved it is because this is yet another very anarchic way to solve issues. Of course, in the old days, if you had a problem and someone was extorting you, you'd call 911 and get the government involved, and usually nothing would really come of it anyway, or maybe the police would show up and shoot your dog. But with you found a free market solution to solving this. Why don't you expand on what you did and how it all turned out?
Yeah, so a couple of nights ago, I was in Singapore for a Bitcoin conference there. And earlier in the day, another friend of mine, another voluntarist type, Jesse Powell, the CEO of Kraken, contacted me and said, "Hey, somebody's impersonating you on Facebook. Is this Facebook profile you? They're asking people for Bitcoin donations for something." And, I've been good friends with him for almost 2 decades now. And he knew that wasn't me on Facebook right away based on how that person was acting. And he knew that that wasn't my Facebook profile. So I looked at that and thought, oh, it looks like somebody maybe did hack into that. And then a little bit later that evening, I figured out that somebody had hacked into an old Hotmail account that was linked to that particular Facebook profile. That I haven't used Hotmail for years and years and years. But a hacker managed to reset the password for that and gain access to that. And then from there, he got access to some other things. And I don't know where he got a hold of my social security number or my previous U.S. passport number, but he had that somewhere. I'm guessing maybe from the Mt. Gox leak. I don't know. But he contacted me over Skype and said, "Hey, I have all this information about you. I'm going to ruin your life via identity theft, and I'm going to ruin your family and your mother's and everybody else's life as well that you care about if you don't pay me $20,000 worth of Bitcoins. And by the way, I respect you as a Bitcoin person," which I thought was strange for him to say as well. But of course,
by the way, a big fan.
Yeah, that's basically what he said. The Skype logs are all online. If you go and Google for that sort of thing, Roger Ver, Nitrous hacker or something to that effect, it'll come up and you can read the entire chat logs. But of course, I'm not going to pay any extortionist ever because there's nothing to stop them from just extorting you again over and over and over again. So I kind of stalled him for time for, I don't know, an hour or two as I was busy trying to lock down all the accounts that I thought he had gotten into. And then finally, when he started really pushing me hard, then I knew what I was going to do from the instant he contacted me, is that I was going to put a bounty of the exact same amount of money that he was trying to extort from me as a reward for any information that's turned over to whatever authorities that lead to his arrest. So when he named his price as to what he wanted to extort me for, I set that as the bounty amount in Bitcoins. So it's 37.6 Bitcoins, which at the time I said it was right around $20,000. With the little Bitcoin price run up, maybe it's, I don't know, maybe almost $22,000 worth of Bitcoins at the moment, and maybe a few years from now it'll be a couple $100,000 worth of Bitcoins, and I'll gladly pay that 37.6 Bitcoins regardless of what the price of Bitcoin is for any information that leads to that guy getting arrested wherever he is in the world. And hopefully he'll watch the Anarchast and learn a thing or two about morality and responsibility and how to deal with other people. Don't cheat people, don't extort people, deal with everybody as other, on a voluntary basis. That makes the world a better place. And that's the only proper way to deal with other people on a voluntary basis. So, but yeah, that's what happened with that, and I'm looking forward to maybe someday that bounty will be worth $1 million as well, and they'll have $1 million reward sitting waiting for any information that winds up getting him arrested by whatever authorities. So.
Yeah, or
if
maybe
there was such a thing as an authority.
That's right. That's what I was going to say. Is perhaps we'll have more free market solutions to solving these problems by then. And it's really interesting because I've gotten at least a few messages from some people. Like, people are really looking into this. People were asking me. They looked at your profile and my profile, and they found 3 people in common who had added us recently, and they're investigating these people. Like, these private investigators are amazing, and that's how this would work in a free market. It's beautiful. It's great. I love it. And yeah, so as Bitcoin rises, this person is going to be under more and more scrutiny, and more people are going to be out trying to find this person who had committed an act of extortion, and it's great. I love it. There's so much to talk about with you. I don't know how much time you have. I know you're very busy, but talking about your lifestyle. I know that you were recently, I believe you became a citizen of St. Kitts. I don't know how much you want to talk about that, about your personal life, but I'm quite interested in it because, of course, one of the things that I really do is I tell people to get out of the U.S. and a lot of countries, a lot of the Western countries, just get out, especially the U.S., though, because it's by far the worst in the Western world. And I tell people to get foreign passports and things of that nature. And I've seen that you've been doing that. You've even started offering passports in exchange, helping people get foreign passports in exchange for Bitcoin. And that's something I do as well. So maybe you can comment a little bit on that.
Yeah, I guess I was in some ways fortunate and in other ways very unfortunate to have been born in the United States as a United States citizen. And if you're trying to do any sort of international business at all, being an American is just a huge drawback. And I've been living outside of the U.S. for over 8 years now, have no intention of ever moving back to the U.S. ever. And had really seriously looked into renouncing my U.S. citizenship a little over 10 years ago. And for anybody who's been through the process, they know it's a lot of work and really difficult to do. And then Bitcoin really motivated me to realize that I shouldn't be American anymore if I'm going to be involved in Bitcoin full time, because I really do see the United States as kind of this totalitarian empire that wants to control the entire world and control everybody. And I figure I'm a heck of a lot safer not being American, not living in the United States, and working really hard to promote Bitcoin because of all the ways that I think it'll make the world a better place, mainly by shrinking the role that the United States government plays over everybody else in the world. So yeah, I'm no longer a citizen of the United States. I formally renounced about 2.5 months ago. They charge you Thank you. They charge you $450 for the privilege of renouncing, and then they tell you have to wait between 1 and 6 months before they actually tell you whether or not they're going to allow you to renounce. And then so basically, I'm waiting for something I believe is called a certificate of loss of nationality or something to that effect, and then I actually have the paperwork to prove that I'm no longer American. So I'm counting the days, hoping that phone call will come any day now, saying that officially they're allowing me not to be American anymore.
Yeah,
but it's really kind of shocking that people think that it's okay that you would even have to ask for permission not to be American anymore or not to be part of any country anymore.
Yeah, it's so funny because, of course, for the last 100 years, there's been so many people around the world who have been dying to get U.S. citizenship, and there still is some, but they're not realizing what's going on in the U.S. right now. They're still watching these Hollywood movies thinking, oh, that's the land of the free, home of the brave, that's where I want to go. No, that all changed quite a while ago, and now the smarter people are actually leaving and renouncing their citizenship, so it just goes to show how these things change. And in the world of statism, it's just a constant constant shuffling around and moving around, trying to find some places that are more free. And on that note, why don't we talk a little bit about Japan, because I find that country just so fascinating. What's your thoughts on living there, and if you have any thoughts as well on what might happen there? Because, of course, Japan has by far the highest debt to GDP in the world. I think it's something like 500%, which is way beyond any other country, except for the U.S., if you calculate the U.S. correctly. So U.S. and Japan are the two worst at the moment. They're essentially bankrupt, insolvent, and I don't know how deep you follow Austrian economics or things like that, but the Bank of Japan said 6 months ago that they were going to double the money supply of the yen in the next 2 years. So I was wondering if you had any comments on Japan in general and what you foresee in the future there.
One thing that I really, really do love about Japan, and like all governments, their government policies are just incredibly stupid. But one thing that I guess is just so much better than the United States is the United States is printing money like crazy, and then they're using it to buy tanks and guns and bombs and murder people all over the world. And at least in Japan, the Japanese government, they're printing money like crazy, which is bad, but at least here they're not using it to kill people around the world. They're using it to build domestic infrastructure for the most part, and other things that, the money could be used for other things better, but at least they're not using it to murder people around. I think there's a lot to be said for that.
Yeah, I agree. Actually, I was talking recently with Mike Rogers, and he was saying that it's what is it? It's something like it's illegal to even advertise about the military in Japan. So they can't even put up posters saying, join the military or anything. And it's really, it doesn't have that support the troops sort of culture that you have in the USSA, where people are almost look at the troops as heroes, even though they're sociopaths on welfare that are murderers, they're in an institution that murders a lot of people at the very least. So yeah, it's very interesting culture over there, and I really enjoy my time when I'm over there for sure. Let's talk just to wrap up. Let's talk a little bit about the future.
If I can add one other note about Japan that I think everybody will find interesting too. Like I have Japanese friends that occasionally go and visit the U.S. and in Japan there's lots of police all over, but they wear little tiny white gloves. Most of them don't have guns, and for the most part, the police in Japan just give people directions to find whatever building it is they're trying to find. And that's when people in Japan think of police, they think of the basically personal maps or personal tour guides that will give you directions to get to where you're going. So when my Japanese friends want to go visit the US, I tell them, if you get lost or don't know where you are, do not ask the police in the US for directions. And they look at me like, are you crazy? What do you mean don't ask the police?
Isn't that what they're for?
Isn't that what they're for? And I tell them, if you ask the police for directions, they're going to give you a hard time and search you, and who knows what reason they're going to find to arrest you, because that's just what they're looking for. And then when they hear it from me, they're not so sure. And then if I have a couple other, American or Western people around too, I tell them, without biasing the conversation, I say, if you're in America and you get lost, should you ask the police officer or a normal person on the street for directions? And this is without them having heard what I just said. They'll always say, of course, don't ask the police. And my Japanese friends say, wow, I didn't know that. Thank you so much for telling me. So I think it's really interesting, the difference there.
Yeah, it's so funny because I spend a lot of time here in Mexico, and whenever I go up to the U.S., all my Mexican friends are so worried about me. They're like, "Hey, don't go up there; it's too dangerous." It's just so funny because of people in the U.S. They think it's this great place, and don't go to Mexico; it's dangerous, and all that kind of stuff. All this propaganda and misconceptions about how things really work everywhere.
And I just remembered one other interesting story. So just the other day when I flew back in from Singapore into Japan, and I almost feel bad because so many Japanese people are so nice and polite about everything. But coming into the country with my St. Kitts passport, the girl had never heard of that country before, didn't know of it. So I think that kind of singled me out a little bit. And she asked if she could search in my luggage. And of course, I don't think anybody should be able to search in my luggage. This is after the flight is over as well. So as the girl's starting to go through my luggage, I asked her, I said, can I search your bag? And she looked at me, and I don't think anybody had ever asked that, and she wasn't picking up on the sarcasm whatsoever. And she looked at me and she said, sure, you can search my bag, but I don't have a bag with me right now. And she starts patting down her pockets to see what she has on her that I can search. And I'm pretty sure if I had asked somebody in the U.S., a TSA agent, if I could search their belongings, I'd be lucky not to get tased.
Oh, you'd be off on the next flight to Cuba. Yeah, no, I used to do a lot of the same sort of stuff. I'd always ask them the questions they asked me because I didn't see any reason why they had any sort of authority over me that I don't have over them. So many times in the past, they'd say, "What are you doing here?" And I'd say, "What are you doing
What are
here?"
you doing here?
I was actually in Egypt. I arrived in Cairo, and I went up, and every country has its own stupid stuff that they ask, and it's all stupid. It's ridiculous. It's pointless. It's just something. It gives someone a job, and a job paid for by stolen funds, of course. And so I was in Egypt, and he asked me the stupidest question I've ever heard. He goes, "What's your father's first name?" And I said, "Why do you want to know that?" He says, "I just need to know that." And I said, "Well, what's your father's first name?" And he said, like, Mohammed or something. And I said, "Oh, my father's name is Ross. I hope one day maybe our fathers can meet." And he just looked at me strange and just passed me on. It's just all ridiculous, all this statism. The final thing I do want to ask you, though, while I have you, because I know a lot of Bitcoiners are going to be watching this, is what's your take on what's going on in the Bitcoin world right now? Where are we at? Of course, Bitcoin really sort of was very stable there for many months, which was interesting, around the $400, $500 level. Just in the last week or so, it's taken off quite a bit from 450 to almost 600. I was wondering your thoughts on Bitcoin, what you're doing in the Bitcoin business world, what kind of opportunities you see out there.
Yeah, for anybody who doesn't know, actually, way back in 2000, I ran for California State Assembly as a libertarian, based on a platform of voluntarism. I said if I was elected, I wouldn't accept any salary whatsoever, and I would repeal as many laws as I possibly could. And in that campaign, I called the ATF a bunch of jackbooted thugs and murderers. And it just so happened that they heard me calling them that and really didn't like me saying those things about me. And they really came down and laid down the law on me. And actually, I did 10 months in federal prison for the things that I said, not about anything that I did. For people that want to read the whole story, they can go to rogerveer.com, and I did a write-up about all the details there. But because of that, I kept quiet for the next decade. I didn't really say anything about government or politics. I just focused on my business and kind of minded my own business and didn't want any trouble from anybody wearing costumes with shiny badges. Until I found Bitcoin. And when I discovered Bitcoin, I realized that this is the best tool that the world has ever seen to shrink the amount of power and control that governments have over other people. And I realized that I had to get involved full time with Bitcoin. And so I poured all the money that I had earned from my previous business into Bitcoins and various Bitcoin startups, and invested in over a dozen Bitcoin startups. Not because I plan to make a whole pile of money, but because I see this as I see Bitcoin as a lever that I can use, and all of us together can use, to move the world in a much, much, much better direction than it's been heading. And it's going to shrink the amount of control and power that governments have of people all over the world. And for over 3 years now, every single waking moment has been devoted to Bitcoin, because I'm just so excited about all the ways that Bitcoin is going to enable the individuals to have more control over their own life. And I can't think of anything more exciting to be working on. And every day I see more and more people getting involved, and more businesses starting, and more ATMs launching in restaurants and businesses and online things, and all sorts of stuff is just happening at a pace that's faster than any single person could ever hope to keep up with. And I see it, and it's really happening. Bitcoin is right on the verge of becoming a prominent currency all over the world, and then from there, the next step is replacing all these pieces of paper that are issued by governments around the world. And it's really encouraging and heartening when, because of my involvement with Bitcoin and being one of the earliest, if not the earliest, investor in the Bitcoin space, I get to meet with all sorts of other traditional venture capitalists that are interested in investing in Bitcoin things, or are investing in Bitcoin things. And one-on-one, privately, they'll tell me, "Roger, I really agree with all these things you're saying about the government and about how they just go around murdering people all over the world. And I can't say that publicly, but I thank you so much for saying those things, and I really appreciate it, and I really support you, and I'm with you in regards to that." And they don't say it publicly, but when I meet with them one-on-one, I can't count how many have said that. And there's a couple that don't and love the state and worship the state, but there's a lot more of them, actually, that aren't interested in governments controlling people. And it's really exciting to see these sorts of people getting involved as well. And even though they're not as public about it as you or I, there's a lot of them that do see it that way. And I can't think of anything more exciting to be involved in on a day-to-day business than Bitcoin.
Yeah, me as well. It's just been an unbelievable ride so far, and it's so exciting, just like you said. And for anyone out there who hasn't got into Bitcoin too much, get into it. You're missing the boat. This is like getting into the internet in 1993, but I think it could be even bigger. And it's not just Bitcoin; it's all sorts of decentralization of the internet and all those sort of things. This is our opportunity as humanity to attain true freedom, all non-violently, which is beautiful. And I was thinking about this recently. In the Bible, they say something like the meek will inherit the earth. Well, I don't know what the exact definition of meek is, but if what they meant or what they were saying was that the people who use non-aggression and are not do not initiate violence against others will inherit the earth, then maybe Bitcoin is sort of one of the ways that they will do that. And on your other points, I also see this all the time now, and I didn't see this a few years ago. Just so you know, I've been in this sort of world now for at least 5 years, and really for the last 10 years. And 10 years ago, hardly anyone knew what we were talking about in terms of freedom and anarchy and libertarianism and those sort of things. 5 years ago, they started to wake up, and a lot of it was actually through Ron Paul and actually through the political system, which was interesting. But in the last few years, it's gone just exponential, and I think it's going to go more exponential. And I also have many big name people who have approached me, and everyone knows these names, but they say, I totally believe in this. Keep up the great work, but I can't say it publicly yet because it's just too dangerous. Much like what you were saying, Roger, they see that, if you're a U.S. citizen living in the U.S., especially if you have business, a lot of these people are actors and very well-known names. They don't want to take the risk. So you just look at what happened with the Iraq War with those country singers or whoever they were, those women singers. They just said, "Hey, I think it's bad to go and kill, a million men, women, and children who had nothing to do with anything for no reason." And they almost, they really hurt their career dramatically. So, but I think we're so close. We're going to get one or two of these big names out there, and they're starting to say it, but they're starting to say it very discreetly because they don't want to be too outward about it. But we're very close to getting a few of these fairly big names. Even people like Woody Harrelson, for example, has said he's an anarchist, but he won't expound on it too much yet because he's just using the word now, which is great. That helps us. But yeah, no, this is an incredibly fascinating and exciting time. And so if you're watching Anarchast and you're an anarchist and you're living in the U.S., for example, and you can't find a job because there's not many jobs, but you shouldn't be looking for a job anyway. You should be trying to create your own business or things you can do, or at least don't get out of the mentality of being an employee. But there's so much to be done. Go to any of these Bitcoin conferences, and I'm sure you would agree, Roger, that it's fascinating, and the amount of energy and the amount of geniuses that are there and the amount of passion that they have for it. I even with the internet, I didn't see anything quite that passionate. These people are it's amazing. So if you haven't gone to a Bitcoin conference, go to one. I'll personally be to many in the next few months. I'll be at one right in the belly of the beast, right in Mordor, in Washington District of Criminals for Bitcoin in the Beltway later this month. I'll be in Carolina for one called, I forget what it's called, Crypto Carolina or something. You can look that up. It's on the Dollar Vigilante website. I've been invited to one in China I might go to, and another one in New Zealand in November. So all over the place. And I don't know about you, Roger. Do you have any near-term plans for any of these?
Yeah, I won't be going to any of the ones in the U.S. in the particular near future, but I've been to 4 or 5 in the last 4 or 5 weeks, and I'm sure there'll be many, many more coming up in the near future as well.
Yeah, there's one in Dubai as well coming up. And it's funny what you just said. I've said that numerous times because many of the sort of freedom-related conferences I go to, including things like Libertopia, Pork Fest, Freedom Fest, they're all in the U.S. And I'm like, why would you have a freedom conference in the U.S.? It's one of the least free countries on earth. And for that reason, I'm actually going to do a conference of our own right here in Acapulco, which I call Anarcho-Poco. And that's what the conference is going to be called, Anarcho-Poco, and that'll probably be sometime next year. So I'll definitely be talking more about that as we get our plans together. So Roger, fascinating, awesome stuff. I'm so glad I got a chance to talk to you. It's been a while. We've been trying to connect. I know you're very busy. If you have anything else you'd like to let people know or talk about, let them know. Any websites or any information you want them to know, please do.
Yeah, I'm sure everybody that watches Anarchast already at least heard of Bitcoin, but if you're at all interested in the ideas of voluntary human interaction, Google Bitcoin, get involved in Bitcoin right now. This is like the best opportunity the world has ever seen. I guess one other quick interesting story too is there was another guy here in Tokyo who was definitely not a libertarian and was loved the state and everything else, and he bought some loved taxes and thought government was wonderful. He bought some Bitcoins from me, and then the price of Bitcoins went up, doubled or maybe 10 times or something. And as soon as the price went up, he contacted me. And this is the same guy that a week earlier had been telling me government's great and taxes are great. And he goes, Roger, how can I hide my Bitcoins from the government? So even people that aren't on board philosophically with us, once they have a tool that makes it so incredibly easy for them not to support the state, I think a lot of them won't. They only want to support the state with your money. They don't want to support the state with their own money. And Bitcoin will give them a really easy way to opt out of supporting the state with their own money, and I think a lot of them will. So if you haven't already, get involved in Bitcoin. Go to meetup.com and search for a Bitcoin meetup group near you. There's one in just about every single city. And when you go there, you can just feel the brain power in the room and the energy there and the excitement that these people have. And just about all of them are, voluntarist, free market advocate types, just about all of them. And it's just such a wonderful, wonderful feeling to be involved in that. So if you're not already, get involved right now today. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell everybody you know about this wonderful, amazing thing that's about to change the lives of everybody on the entire planet called Bitcoin.
Great way to finish it up. And I should just add, we at the Dollar Vigilante, it's just dollarvigilante.com, we have something called TDB groups, which you can get access to if you subscribe to our newsletter. But we're also going to give access to it soon in the next few weeks, just for a small fee. And it's actually groups of mostly libertarian and anarchist people around the world. We have at least 70 or 80 cities and 40 or 50 different countries already. And we're starting one in Tokyo as well. I think Mike Rogers or Mark Abella are deciding who's going to run it. So that's a way that you can get involved in addition to things like Meetup is to, and that's even better because then you know that the people are more aligned with your philosophical views on things. So check all that out. And if you like what we're talking about, you don't know how to spread the word of freedom, just subscribe to the Anarchast YouTube channel and please share all our videos. That's one way, and that's the best way actually to get this information out there is to share it. So that's it. I'd like to thank Roger once again. That was awesome. I really enjoyed that. And this has been Anarchast, your home for anarchy on the internet. Peace, love, and anarchy.
This is Anarchast.